Morning. We are on Tuf Yud Gimel Amud Beis 113b. The Gemara has been giving us lists and groupings of types of people that God loves, people that God has the opposite feelings toward. This came on the heels of pieces of advice that were given to us in groups of, so and so gave 5 pieces of advice to so and so and such. So in that context, the Gemara continues now with quite a number of lists and groupings of what kind of personalities they are and how to do, or what their life is like and how people react to them. Each one of these items requires its own Fabrengen, understand it? And certainly the grouping requires a Fabrengen, like why are these grouped as they are? Okay, they have open as always. Okay, so you count from the wider set of lines, you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 line down from the wider set of lines. In the middle of the line, it says Taner Rabbanon. You see it there?
Yeah.
Okay. Taner Rabbanon, our sages taught. So we're quoting a Mishnah text which reads, Shloisha, there are 3 kinds of people. Chayeyen einam chayim. Their life is no life at all. So they're alive, but they're constantly stressed out. And they are, number 1, harachmanin, those who are too empathetic, can't get on with life. Everything that they see that goes wrong in the world, it gets them completely, fully stressed out. There's people like that. People read the news about what's happening wherever. Certainly, you're a Jew and you see what's going on in Israel. But there's people who they read about a car crash in California and they can't sleep. They can't figure it. They can't.
Yeah, that's debilitating.
It's completely debilitating. Their life is no life because they're completely consumed by their over empathy. There's a word for it in psychology. I can't remember what it's called. It's beyond empathy. It's like where it gets so much that it completely consumes the person. It's not healthy. So that's one. The other is harat, too sensitive. Yeah. Or desensitized when a person doesn't care at all. This is the opposite, where a person cares so much it can't move forward. Completely. Sorry?
Hypersensitive.
Yeah, hypersensitive. It's, uber sensitive. Where they can't, everything, unfortunately, there's a bit of a culture nowadays like this. It's not exactly because it's a bit of a narcissistic type thing, the modern culture, but there's this notion out there. You read an article online, and the offense is considered abuse and it's violence because you said something to me. I'm not so sure if this is exactly the same thing, because I don't know that comes from a place of compassion so much as it comes from narcissism. But nonetheless, this is a type of thing where the person is completely stressed out by everything that's going around him, and he cannot function because everything he sees that's not well, his empathy completely drags him down, and he can't move. It's a psychological thing. It's a psychological condition. Where finds out that his neighbor is sick and he can't go to work that day because his neighbor's sick, he can't move. Whereas most people feel very bad, right? But they still function. Whereas this person is just so. Yeah, it's not because you don't care, right?
It's like you care too much.
Care too much. Yeah, it's like the Rambam's rule of the middle, the golden mean, the middle road, right? Where too much empathy is no good, and no empathy is also no good. You got to have in the middle where the person has a certain degree of empathy, but at the same time can still move forward, can function. But this person can't function. Chayin and chayin. His life is not no life. That's category 1. Category 2 is baharat, those who are easy to anger. Everything triggers them. Everything gets them angry. Everything gets them upset. They can't move. You touched it. You did this. You looked at me this way. You looked at it. Can't move. Can't do anything. Just constantly getting upset and worked up about things that are true or imagined or whatnot. And number 3, anini hadas, people who are too sensitive, too particular, too my shirt has to be this way. My
Meticulous.
Meticulous. Maybe it's a little bit of an OCD type thing.
OCD.
It's an OCD type thing where the person,
neurotic,
a little bit,
neurosis.
yeah. All of these are kind of neurosis, but this is a kind of maybe OCD type neurosis where the person can't move because this was moved the wrong way and this was moved there, and I can't sleep now because then I locked the door yet, and
not Rain Man.
with a particular OCD,
autistic.
spectrum autism.
Very,
Yeah,
very narrow.
I think you're speaking more of like an OCD type thing. You know, everything is sensitive about everything. His shirt's not the right way. His thing, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel right. The shoe's not fitting perfectly. He can never decide on what shoes he wants to get because it's too big, too small, it's too scratchy, too tall, too thin, too heavy. Everything's too something. And you can't live that way.
Perfectionist.
Perfectionist. Chayin and chaim. Your life is no life.
It's, all these cases are auto-consuming.
Yes, that's the point. They
Their mind.
completely consume the person and he cannot live.
Person with a disorder of some sort, God forbid. So
That's
we
right.
think about it.
He has no rest. There's no rest. That's the language of the Rashbam. Ein le menucha. He has no rest. He's constantly consumed by these things. Three different types of categories. Too empathetic, too quick to anger, and too particular, too perfectionist. Now, the commentary of the Gemara here is completely psychological. It doesn't say God likes it or doesn't like it. It just describes it as a matter of fact. These people, their life is no life because they can't rest. So says the Gemara, Rav Yosef says, Kulu isnahubi. I suffer from all three of these.
Who said that?
Rav Yosef, the great sages of the Gemara, says he says he suffered from all these three. He had all these problems, all these things.
Oh, in past tense, he means he recovered.
No, I have them all.
Oh, he had.
Kulu is to be, they all exist within me. That's the translation. They all exist within me. He suffered from all of these. I'm saying he suffered because he's been past for 2,000 years, something like that. But he was speaking in present tense. I suffer from all these things. Quite something. If I'm not mistaken, this is Rabbi Yosef, who's actually blind too. If I'm not mistaken. And nonetheless, the Gemara describes elsewhere, if I'm remembering correctly that this was him, he's the one who said, if not for the day of the giving of the Torah, how many Yosefs would there be in the marketplace? I'd just be another Joe Schmo if I didn't have Torah. And he says also, if I remember correctly, he's the one that when he turned 60, made a celebration for the sage with his fellow sages for his 60th birthday. If I'm not mistaken, this is the same Rabbi Yosef. I'm not mistaken. Someone watching knows better. Please correct me. Okay, so that's the first statement, psychological sort of statement on identifying these three conditions: excess emotion, whether it's excess emotion in empathy, excess emotion in anger, or hot-bloodedness, or excess emotion in terms of being particular about what there is. I think let me put it this way. I think what Rav Yosef is doing by telling us that he suffers from all of these, I think what he's trying to tell us is that this is a psychological condition, not a religious one. Meaning to say, Torah, the parts of Torah that deal with ethical works, Musar, starting from Pirkei Avos, going down to modern Musar, Hasidus, speaks about the moral character. They all discuss ways to deal with these kinds of things. For example, and actually in all of these things, all three of these things, the commonality would be, in terms of dealing with it, is having faith in Hashem. Something happened to you don't like. It's the way Hashem wanted it to be. Relax. You're stressed out because you heard there was a car accident down the street. It's a terrible thing. You feel bad for everybody, but this is the way Hashem wants it to be, right? Don't get all worked up about it. Have certain trust in Hashem. Now, what happens is sometimes a person suffers from OCD, let's say, and the OCD can come out in religion. As washing his hands 15 times because he's not sure if he got it right, or a person will say, I'm super angry, so I'm going to meditate the way Tanya says to meditate, that everything happens from Hashem, and therefore there's no reason to get angry, and so on. Yeah? So you could think of them as religious conditions, and therefore religious solutions. And that's true if you're a healthy person. If the person suffers from this on a clinical level, go to a doctor. Don't open the book of Hasidus, go to a doctor. And I think that's what Rabbi Yosef is trying to do. Rabbi Yosef is saying, look, I'm a very religious person, I'm a sage. And I suffer from all these three things. not a reflection on my relationship with God. They're a psychological condition. Maybe that's perhaps why Rabbi Yosef is telling us this. Thanks for the humility of him acknowledging that he suffers from these conditions. But I think he's also trying to tell us, it doesn't say here, the other groups where it's like God hates them or God loves them. It doesn't say that here. It doesn't no comment about Hashem. It just says their life is no life. So go get help. And Rabbi Yosef is saying, look, I suffer from these things also. It's not a question of my religiosity. It's not a question of I'm lacking faith in Hashem and that's why I'm getting angry. Or I'm lacking faith in Hashem and that's why I can't stop thinking about the 2 doors down, someone is sick, too empathetic. I suffer from these just because that's who I am. It's just the conditions that Hashem gave me. So I got to get help for it. I don't know what Rabbi Yosef did to deal with it. It doesn't say. But he's acknowledging that he suffered from these conditions. And I think that's perhaps why the Gemara even tells us about this, that we shouldn't think that these are religious conditions that can be solved with religious solutions. Religious solutions are not for medical conditions. That's for a doctor. Torah says go to a doctor. The same way Torah says to go to a doctor for your broken leg, God forbid. Torah says to go to a doctor for, God forbid, a broken emotional condition, or broken mental condition. Right? The remedies the meditative remedies that the Torah gives us, it's like the gym. Like the gym. You don't need a doctor to go to the gym. Everybody's got to go to the gym and stay healthy. Everybody's got to go eat healthy. Right?
Would advocate
To go to mental health professionals? Absolutely, certainly. If it's needed. Along with that would include meditating on Hashem gives you everything, and therefore you don't have to be angry because Hashem. That's not. It's like telling God to go to the gym while also going to a physical therapist if that's what's required, right? Yeah. So that's my feelings, and I think that's perhaps why Rabbi Yosef says that he suffers from this. That we shouldn't make the mistake of thinking that this is solely a religious issue.
Like the person may think, oh, I'm not keeping up with Torah, then
and that's why I'm getting all empathetic and to fix it that way. When actually he needs to go to a doctor. He also has to connect in Torah, but when he's healthy, he can then imbibe the Torah's instructions, which are like going to a gym for the mind, going to the gym for the soul. But sometimes you got to go to the doctor for the soul, just like you would have to go to the doctor for a body. And I think that's perhaps why Rabbi Yosef is telling us this. It's because he's saying, look, I'm a very religious and healthy man and good Jewish person. I still suffer from this stuff. Not because I lack faith, not because I lack meditation and relationship with Hashem, but because I have a medical condition that made me stuck with these things. Maybe. Again, this is my interpretation of this. Something like that, yeah. Yeah. Rambam refers to them, not doctors actually. Rambam refers to Roifen and Roifen Nefashis. The healers of the psychologists. Roifen Nefesh, healers of the psyche, of the conscience. Yeah, what are you saying?
I was going to say that for 86 years I lived with everything, all my faculty.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden this happened.
Yeah.
And I could have fallen apart.
Yeah.
It's enough to make somebody fall apart.
Certainly.
Really. I'll tell you, it's just horrendous. And she said, to myself, you made me like this. You did this to me. Either you're testing me or I did something wrong. But
well, who knows?
Testing me. And you'll fix me if I have to be fixed. If not,
and I have to add.
I'll
add the reason.
I'll still live.
If I can add, the reason you're not falling apart is because you're going to the gym of the soul, the gym of the mind.
Gym of the soul.
Come to learn every day. You're going to the gym of the soul, the mind, and you're not falling apart. 100%. That's a healthy condition. Right? That's right.
You did this.
That's a healthy condition. The people I think that are describing here are the kinds of people who, even without that, can't handle life because it's so overwhelming. Right? I think it's a mental condition. It's a mental health condition.
This is what's really keeping me going.
Yeah. See, perhaps there people talk about if you have sources in Torah for mental health conditions. Here would be one. A basic acknowledging I suffer from all three of these conditions. No, there's no statement about God in this. It doesn't say God doesn't like them, or God. It doesn't even say God's punishing them. It just says a condition about life. There's three types of people who can't live. It's a mental health condition, seems to me. Okay, now the Gemara is going to give us a other sort of commentary on the nature of the world, and why it's relevant for us to know, why the Gemara seems it necessary to teach us this, and why our sages feel it necessary to teach us this is a good question, and we'll open the floor to interpretation. But here's the Gemara's statement. Tana Rabbanan, our sages taught. So again, we're quoting a Mishnah text. Shloisha, there are three types. Soinin zeh, three groups, who everyone in the group hates each other. And Elohein, they are the following: Haklavim, dogs. Dogs hate each other. Hatana Goylin, chickens. Roosters, they'll hate each other. Yeah. V'hachavorin. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But this are what was it again? I looked up Steinsaltz. And it's the other Steinsaltz note. It's I think it's like mystics, like these people of the occult, like pagan occults, Psachim, yeah. Number volume, the last volume. I don't know what 113b. I think it's those who are like seers of the future, diviners. These like what do they call it?
Diviners?
The diviners, like the palm readers, those type of charlatan type people. Here. Yeah. Persian priests. That's what it was. Okay. Where's the notes? Here we are. A variant reading is haverim, i.e., people who band together to lord over others. Alternatively, it refers to business partners who come to hate each other due to the constant interactions. Oh, look at this. I'm going to go back to Rav Yosef here for a second. On the note here. Some commentators explain that this is due to Rav Yosef's blindness. A blind person is unable to determine if a call for help is exaggerated. So he's overly sensitive. With regard to anger, Rav Yosef often suspected people of acting against his will because he couldn't see. Furthermore, his blindness rendered him especially sensitive to dirt of any kind. Okay, so linking a psychological state considering his blindness, which would only bolster my contention that he's suffering from a mental health condition, and he's aware of it, which is an amazing thing. He's aware of his own mental health condition, and maybe it's a result of his blindness, right? A person has trauma, and it causes him to have mental health conditions, so his blindness caused him to have the mental health conditions. I would take that.
Sounds like in that commentary that his condition is a result of his blindness.
So like a lot of mental health conditions that come as a result of trauma of some sort. Anyway, back to it would support my contention. This comes from the Ben Yoda. So anyway, here the Chavarin here, and said they were people of the occult, but here it says Persian priests. The point is they're constantly competing with each other for power, rule, attention, something of that nature. So they hate each other. Those are groups of people who hate each other. Okay, Yesh Amrim. Others say Afazonos, also women professionals, entertainers. What's the prostitutes? They hate each other. Yeah, they're competing for people's attention. Now get this. Yesh Amrim, some say Av Talmidei Chacham Shabbavel. Also the scholars of Babylonia hate each other. What? What does this even mean? Right? Okay, so we know that the Babylonian school of learning and the Jerusalem school of learning are very different. It's called the Jerusalem, but really it's Israel as a whole. But the Jerusalem Talmud wasn't written in Jerusalem at all, actually. It was written outside of Jerusalem. They were exiled from Jerusalem, displaced from Jerusalem, and they're hanging out the Galilee for the most part. Nonetheless, it's called the Jerusalem Talmud. Okay, so the two schools of thought. The schools are, in the Jerusalem Talmud, the lights turned on. You see everything, you know where you're going. So everybody's very calm and peaceful in their discussions because we see everything very clearly and we can go directly to the conclusions, which is why the Jerusalem Talmud doesn't have the kind of back and forth that we go through in the Gemara here. Comment, counter comment, an argument, a counter argument, a proof, dismantling the proof, a counter proof, rethinking the whole thing from the beginning after a page and a half and then going through the same process again. That's the Babylonian Talmud that we learn because we're walking in the dark. We don't know. So there is the quote unquote hatred of each other. We're constantly battling out and deking out our ideas. Whereas in the Jerusalem Talmud, they don't do that.
Because they feel inferior.
So, I was going to say that. So these comments actually, this comment is from the Mishnaic era. In the Mishnaic era, there were scholars in Babylonia already. But these are scholars in Israel speaking. And they're saying those people there, their learning is way different than ours. They're constantly killing each other over their texts. We're not doing that. The Gemara has quite a few comments like this throughout, about how the Babylonian scholars are constantly fighting each other, battling each other out to sharpen their ideas, which is why, by the way, one of the reasons at least, why we halachically follow the Babylonian Talmud, because they've deeped it out. And because they've given to us the process by which they've come to their conclusions, we can then use that rationale to apply it to new cases. With the Jerusalem Talmud, they just give us the conclusions without the background. It's hard to apply it to any other cases. Right?
There's a major distinction between arguing and hating.
Yep. So maybe from the perspective.
Arguing is healthy.
Right.
It's mostly healthy.
So from the perspective of the Jerusalemites, that looked like hatred. Maybe that's how we'll understand it. From the perspective of the scholars who are sitting calmly, going through their learning without having to battle it out, they're looking at the people in Babylonia and saying, "What are you guys doing? What are you guys doing?"
Right. It was incomprehensible for
Yeah.
them to see this.
Perhaps.
Type of,
That's right, because of how far superior their learning was. Yeah, perhaps. Anyway, checking the synagogue. Not there. Sorry. Nice. Anyway, at the end of all this, why is the Gemara telling us this? Why is it important to know that dogs hate each other, that chickens hate each other, that priests hate each other, and that female entertainers hate each other, and that scholars in Babylonia, quote, hate each other, at least from the perspective of the Jerusalemites, if our reading is correct? I don't know. Anyone?
So chickens on each other.
They're all competing for the same thing.
They're competing with each other. That's the point. Yeah.
Same thing.
They're all in competition. So is that a good thing or is that not a good thing?
Well, it could be a good thing.
It doesn't say, sorry?
It could be a good thing.
Oh.
If it's healthy.
So it gets back. So the Gemara doesn't say, well, God, there's no comment about God here. God likes them, doesn't like them. Doesn't say that anywhere here.
That's a free choice element, I guess.
So it's similar to the previous statement. The previous statement was also a psychological condition. And if it's taken too far, it's unhealthy. You can't live. So maybe something similar here. And the Gemara therefore throws in the idea of the scholars of Babylonia. This ability for competition could lead, which is like a hateful idea, so to speak.
Can you see it in the cursing? Some of the sages cursed others over argumentation.
Sure.
And they were either died or were severely handicapped.
You're speaking specifically about the Rabbi Levi and Lakish, their brother-in-laws. Yeah, that's a famous tragic story at the end of their life, the end of Rabbi Lakish's life, and both of their lives. But yes, so I think perhaps what the Gemara is doing here, the Gemara is telling us that this innate, primal human urge to feel animosity toward another should end up like dogs, like chickens, like priests, like prostitutes, or like the sages of Babylonia. Depends how you use it. And even the sages of Babylonia have to make sure it's tempered, of course. Also have to be tempered. Be careful not to take it too far, because God forbid it can end up in the wrong way. That's right. There were. That's like Gemara saying there were. And the Gemara records such fights. The Gemara is not the type to censor history. They don't like, there's a tendency in some circles to make everybody the past perfect. But the Gemara is very honest sometimes about the failures of some of the sages, or not failures, but anyway, whatever how we want to say it, but the way in which the sages behave, there's a lesson for how we shouldn't behave sometimes.
They didn't fudge the numbers.
They didn't fudge the numbers.
Exactly what happened.
Exactly the way it is. And so the Gemara is telling us here also the sages of Babylonia, quote unquote, hated each other. At times it was used to their benefit, and sometimes, God forbid, not. So I think that's what the Gemara is doing here. And maybe if we wanted to get even more particular, I don't have the answer to this, but we would have to think about what's the difference between the way the dogs hate each other, the way the chickens hate each other, the way the priests hate each other, and the way the prostitutes hate each other, and like what is the uniqueness of the Gemara's about each one, which is why the Gemara tell us all of them to be aware of all these different types of misappropriated, quote, hate, animosity toward one another. Right? I don't know what the difference would be. I don't know what dogs are fighting over. Maybe they're fighting over territory. Dogs could be fighting over territory. Chickens are fighting over the kernels of food. The priests are fighting over attention of others. The prostitutes are jealous over over love.
Figure out.
So there's different types of reasons that a person has to be aware of what's causing him to be quote unquote in hatred of others, or is like the sages of Babylonia, where it's over Torah. Right? So maybe that's what why the Gemara is giving us all these different types, so we can learn from each of them what yes and what not. Maybe. So in that regard, the Gemara now gives us the inverse. And we'll conclude with that. Tan Rabban, our sages taught, there are three groups who love each other. There are three groups who, God forbid, hate each other, which ended up being, we added two more, so it ended up being five. Because there were those who said also the prostitutes, those who said also the sages of Babylonia, so you have five groups. And here the Gemara tells us there are three groups that love each other. And Elohein, they are the following. Hagerim, converts. Avadim, slaves. Va'ervin, and ravens. But what's the presumably the point here? Three groups of people who feel themselves, or could feel themselves, as separate from others. So they band together with a commonality. Which is another lesson. Right? You find a commonality sometimes in being on the outside. And that itself gives you a certain commonality. Right? So it's the opposite of the other groups. The other groups were people who are attention seeking from the world outside, and therefore they're in competition with each other. The dogs over, I'm making this up, but dogs over territory, chickens over food, the prostitutes over intimacy. Whereas these three groups are on the outside, and they look at this, say, we're not competing for any of that, actually. We're not in the competition of any of that stuff. You guys put us in a separate category. And consequentially, we're actually going to band together and love each other. Right? So there's like, it's the inverse of the previous statement with a sort of positive side to it. Right? Or maybe the Gemara is teaching us how to use that which might be seen as a blemish from the outside as a reason to say, you know what? We're going to do our own thing, like
negative into positive.
Exactly. Like the Jews in the 40s and the 50s, we saw signs at golf clubs and hospitals that said no Jews, no dogs, no blacks. And they said, you know what? You don't let us come to your hospital? Good, we'll make our own hospital, the Jewish General Hospital. We'll do it better. Like the golf clubs, actually Hampstead, if I'm not mistaken, at least a certain part of Hampstead was a golf club that no Jews, no dogs, no blacks. It's 96% Jewish. And my great-grandfather was part of a group of people that sold it to the developer that was involved in that transaction. But this is the way this is the way of outcasts, the way of those who are on the outside, or at least if they do it right, instead of competing, instead of like trying to fight to get into the class that they're supposedly being held out of, they just band together and say, you know what, we'll do our own thing.
Jews, ravens.
It was converts, slaves, and ravens.
Oh.
And ravens.
Converts become a part of us.
Yeah, 100%. There's mitzvah for us to.
What?
Look, we have famously, we have to know reality, right? What you're describing is what should be. Hopefully, everybody gets to that level. Reality remains reality, and this goes far back, right? We have a famous letter from we looked at once on Shabbos afternoon. The famous letter that Rambam wrote to Avadia the Ger, who lived in Yerushalayim, giving him a whole beautiful letter about how much Hashem loves him as a convert, and how he's he's a direct son of Hashem, and a whole goes on to say how most Jews, their covenant with Hashem goes back to their parents, whereas your covenant is directly to Hashem. A beautiful, beautiful. He was being harassed. Not a real Jew, your old beliefs, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, this is going back for years already. Especially today, it's a bit different because today, your identity, your citizenship isn't tied so much to your religion. In the old day, you're human, your status as human as a citizen was connected to your religion. Depending on what religion you were, you had a different status in society, literally, legally a different status, right? Yeah, that's right. And in our history classes, we've been talking about this, and therefore, there was a lot of times, like, for better or for worse, there were like suspicions. Maybe you converted because it's a better social class. Going back to King Solomon, right, where there was all these people who converted then because King Solomon was dominant and they wanted to be part of the Jewish religion so that they can get the benefits of being Jewish.
Write a letter from at New Year. There was a nice letter.
Yeah, I just finished saying that, Rambam. I just finished describing that. Yeah, Avadia the Ger. Yeah. So talking about those people, yeah. So clearly this is an issue that existed. Over it, I think, I hope, right? But it's a reality that existed and probably still exists in some circles. To modern times, Baruch Hashem, I don't think it's much of an issue. But nonetheless, there's, I don't know, I'm sure there's like Baal Teshuvos, for example. You have to go Sugerim, Baal Teshuva. Baal Teshuvos often will come together, they have shared experiences, they have shared struggles in trying to integrate, and they'll band together to create a loving community. Expats do the same thing, right?
I've seen it in
That's correct.
documentation.
That's right. Israelis who don't talk to each other in Israel, they come to America, they create Israeli communities, and they're all buddies because they're all expats, right? So you have a certain commonality as an outsider.
Yeah.
You stick together. So, the historical theory that the reason why the Jews did so well in exile is because we never integrated. Because we weren't allowed to integrate.
We didn't become chickens.
We didn't become like we didn't become like chickens, dogs, and we became like the slaves, right? Right? Which was a big challenge of modernity. Challenge of the last 100 years of modernity, which unfortunately we lost many Jews to modernity who just completely abandoned Judaism. Why? Modernity, right? The Enlightenment. Why did we lose them? Because we're no longer being forced to be different. Until Hitler reminded us that we don't really care if you're monoed or not. We still hate you, right? So that reminds the Jew that we're different. But that differentness bands us together. So within the Jewish world as well, I have the same thing. Converts, slaves, and ravens. Okay, what do each of these three bring to the table that's different than the other one? I don't know. Got to think about what makes them different. Right? The commonality I just explained, but what's the difference between the three of them? It's better that way because then the Gemara is giving you a lesson for each type, right? A lesson from each type. In that maybe slaves subservient to others, converts aren't subservient to anyone, they're just out, they just might be a little different. Ravens aren't subservient or different, but they're kind of looked down at lowly because they're like the ravens. I don't know. I'm just
A lot of Russians who come to the States who have had different beliefs in Russia and separate from each other, hated each other, and they come to see in Florida. And I've spoken to them before. They're all friends.
that's right. Expat.
But if they shut off Russia, they still have Russia in their mind. They follow Russia.
See, because
But now
it's better the familiar that I hate than the unfamiliar. Right? It's like when you're flying, when you're traveling, you see a Jew, there's like a nod because we're both Jewish. You want a familiarity.
Yeah.
When we're back at home, I don't know, I might not talk to you. Right?
You know what?
Is it real? Is it genuine?
It's not necessary. It could be necessary, but it's genuine also in the sense that we feel a commonality. We feel a common shared experience, a shared identity.
Commonality is a conditional.
Back together. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm actually arguing that the Gemara's comment here is that the commonality is created by those who push them out.
Yeah.
That's
It's
my
sort
argument
of
here.
Like an counterintuitive sort of
Yep.
condition.
Yep.
It's funny what you said before.
Yeah.
We were in Greece, and coming home from Greece and playing, and you hardly ever see a Chabad guy.
Yeah.
And I see this guy with the Chabad hat.
Yeah. It's always a beautiful fun. It's always
So I walked up to the front and I started to talk. We had a long talk together.
always.
And you know what it was? Sirota.
Oh yeah. If you saw him walking down the street over here, you would maybe nod. That would be it.
He says hello to me now.
But when you're in Greece, now you're having a conversation. Yeah. Okay, you have a wonderful day of good Ner Shabbos. Today is the 7th of Adar 1. And last year, 2 years ago, it was also a leap year, and we gave a special class. If you remember, we gave a special class on the 7th of Adar. I posted it on the groups. Have a look at it, about the uniqueness and why today's the 7th Adar, specifically the 7th of the first Adar, is really the cause and reason for the joy of the whole Adar. So have a look at that. The uniqueness and specialness of the day, being Moshe Rabbeinu's birthday, whether the first Adar, the second Adar, and why it seems that the first Adar is the primary celebration.
Just finish reading.
Yeah, okay, have a good day. What's that?
In English.
What?
7.
Yeah, have a it's a beautiful thing. Have a good day and good Shabbos. Sorry? Good question. So
That's the pinnacle of joy, and Purim represents.
yeah.
The other.
There's something unique about Purim Katan also, which we discussed. Yeah.
We chose the other.
Okay, you have a wonderful day.